The 1990s, the end of the Cold War. Life is changing all around the globe.
Most people are working harder for less money than they were making 10 years ago.
You have to pinch yourself to realize it, but the Thatcher era is over.
Technology is rapidly evolving. Millions of people get access to the internet. People can record their lives, watch their favorite movies at home.
What is with this guy? Who is he?
But with the world changing so rapidly, some of us can't keep up. And as we rush toward the end of the millennium, we question our future.
When? How will the world ever...
And?
Yes!
Joining me now, director Mike Leigh.
And our next movie is named Naked. Now, this is another strange and darkly original work by the British director Mike Leigh.
With a barnstorming central performance by David Thewlis, both of whom took top prizes at the Cannes Film Festival when Naked premiered there back in the early 90s.
This is Mike Leigh's Naked from 1993, a nocturnal journey through the dark underbelly of post-Thatcher London and a deeply philosophical exploration of the human psyche. But while it's considered one of the bleakest films of the 1990s, it contains a lot of comedy and charm too.
People often ask me, when do you decide when it's funny and when it... I don't, because if you really make real situations, look at them in a real way, with the spirit of really dealing with reality, then the comic moments present themselves.
Oh, listen, what's the name again?
Mikey!
Oh, yeah.
And the serious moments and the tragic moments and the ugly moments present themselves.
What are you going to do for Christmas?
I don't know what you're going to do.
And because we create these worlds that come alive in a very organic and three-dimensional way, you get the comedy and the tragedy.
This is due to the exceptional work of the actors, especially David Thewlis, who got the Best Actor award at Cannes, along with the Best Director for Mike Leigh, whose idiosyncratic approach to filmmaking got him unexpected praise and accolades worldwide. The film is about a drifter called Johnny, who is on the run and goes from Manchester to London, where he goes to his ex-girlfriend Louise. It contains episodes from Johnny's next couple of days, where he meets all kinds of people as he roams the streets at night. It's a unique piece even in his filmography, because of its heavy focus on one character instead of his usual ensemble. It's visuals that reminds us of film noirs from the 50s, and it's got wrenching scenes and nihilistic themes. The British director who worked for theatre at the beginning of his career uses a very distinctive approach to create his characters, script, and to shoot his films.
Most of my films, there's no discussion about what it's about because I go into a long period of development with the actors, and what it is gradually emerges.
He's known for rehearsing for a long period of time before shooting, which means he collaborates with his actors extensively for months, and he needs everyone to explore and create their own character as if they were fully fleshed out human beings. The film's plot is also only discovered during this time. This approach results in raw, organic performances where the audience can see much more in the characters on screen than directions or dialogue suggests.
It's about elevating actors to the status of artists in their own right, creative, collaborative contributors in their own right.
Leigh approaches his actors without anything concrete. He just asks them if they like to work with him.
You with me?
Huh?
I really work by inviting actors to take part. Say to each actor, come and be in this film. I can't tell you what it's about. I can't tell you what your character is. We'll invent that as part of the process of doing it. And you will never know any more about what's going on, any more than your character knows. And that makes it possible to do long and elaborate and detailed improvisations that investigate the years and years of people's lives in a completely organic and spontaneous way.
This obviously makes it harder to find actors who are willing to go through this process, but also to find funding for his films. In 1992, David Thewlis was a relatively unknown actor. He worked twice before with Mike Leigh. On the short film The Short and Curlies, and he had a small role in Life is Sweet as the lover of Nicola. Leigh wanted to work with him again.
And so I said, I guarantee that whatever happens, you will have a very substantial slice of the pie. And this is the result.
You look like my mother.
The process of creating these characters could be summarized in 3 steps: observe, explore, transform. Observation is the part where Mike Leigh asks his actors to think about real people in their lives who they find interesting. He sits down with each actor privately and discusses these observations and talk for hours. When I first met in preparation for this film, David Thewlis listed about 150 people he knew or met, and Lee asked them about their habits, past, sexual lives, and everything in between, until they found the character he liked for his story. Of course, at this point, the structure of the film wasn't clear. That is all based on these characters. Exploration is when Lee and the actor start to create the history of this character, their upbringing, interests, past relationships, and traumas. Everything that makes them a living, breathing human being is discussed. Thewlis was observed for weeks by the director, and as he said, short of masturbation, he'll watch you do anything. At this point, Lee forbids his actors to meet each other. He wants them to do all this privately and become one with the character.
I am motivated throughout the whole thing by the single, simple premise that everybody is interesting.
Then comes transformation. He's not a fan of method acting, so he wants the actors to be able to come out of character whenever he wants them to. The characters in his films are complex and all have tragic backgrounds, so there has to be a distance between them and the characters, otherwise it can end badly, as it almost did, multiple times. You see, Lee's approach doesn't end here. After the actors find their roles, the rehearsals begin.
We also spend lots of days, non-shooting days, rehearsing those scenes. Sometimes just sitting in a room on two chairs. We had to get it right. Just to get the dialogue right and to get it, because it's so precise.
This is the first time some of these actors meet, and they have to do it in character, without cameras, without the crew, just a place Mike Leigh tells them to go to, and a simple situation where they can improvise. On one of these occasions, David Thewlis as Johnny met Ewan Bremner's Scottish character Archie on the streets of London. After improvising for a while, the two characters started to get aggressive, they shouted, and it got physical unbeknown to bypassers and even the police, who got cold that this was just a performance. John even had a screwdriver on him, which he stole in character earlier from somewhere, and he threatened to stab Archie.
Mike decided this has gone too far, so all the bystanders saw was Mike Leigh, this short, bearded fella, stepping up to these two yobs. What they didn't hear was he came up to us and whispered, "Come out of character."
They had to explain to the police that while this was all for a film, they didn't have cameras because they were just rehearsing. The rule for Lee was whenever there was a chance for violence, or the actors were about to have sex, he stopped them. This process means that every scene we can see now was at first part of a long improvisation. But at the end, Mike Leigh never lets them improvise on set. Everything is precisely directed by the time they shoot these scenes.
There are two myths about my films, and this one not least. One is that in the so-called rehearsal period before the shoot, we completely developed a whole script, which we then just film in a conventional way. That's not true. We prepare the premise of the thing, but we actually develop each scene, sequence by sequence, on location by location, during the course of the shoot. We build the film up and discover the film as we go along shooting it. The other myth, of course, is that the actors are improvising on screen, which is absolute rubbish, basically, because it's very, very precise.
There is none.
No.
For example, one of the most iconic scenes in the film, the long-winded debate about past, future, God, and the end of our species, with Peter Wright's security guard, Brian, was trimmed down from more than 8 hours of improvised conversation between Johnny and him.
I've got an infinite number of fucking places to go. The problem is where you stay. You with me? Indeed.
And it is without a doubt one of the greatest dialogues ever on film.
Are you not familiar with the book of Revelations of St. John, the final book of the Bible, prophesying the apocalypse?
Yes, as it happens, I'm familiar with all the books of the Bible.
I'm very happy for you.
The director observes these long dialogues, picks up parts or themes that could be interesting, then decides on certain scenarios where they can use these. This also means that the actors deserve just as much praise for the script as Lee does. The things we can hear from David Thewlis are partly due to his extensive reading while becoming Johnny.
I don't know. I find all this a bit sad.
His monologue about the apocalypse was also a mixture of things he learned from different sources. The barcodes, Nostradamus, August 18, 1999, everything was found during this process and put together here in this scene to form a complete sequence. Even small details like Johnny asking the security guard if he can smoke.
What about these toilets? Can I smoke in here? No, you fucking can't!
Is a result of the long improvisation they did before in the office building, because David Thewlis was a smoker at the time, and he wanted to smoke during the long rehearsals, but Brian, as he was in character, forbid him because of the fictional corporate policy.
So it's very personal and it's very idiosyncratic and intuitive.
The famous silhouette scene was shot 26 times because Lee wanted to keep it as one take without cutting. So David Thewlis had to do it over and over again. But in the end, they chose to use one of the early takes. The idea of them being silhouetted also came from an early improvisation, where Peter Wright, the actor of Brian, stopped before turning on the lights at the other side of the room and continued to argue instead, which Lee really liked visually, so they implemented it into the film as well.
You want me to go on? The end of the world is nigh, bride. The game is up.
Although everything is rigid and in place during filming, according to David Thewlis, there was one scene Lee let him improvise in. It's where he gets beaten up by the poster guy with the van. All Lee told him was that he had to be annoying and get kicked down at the end. So everything here about the walls, about being cancelled, and even the memorable line,
"Does anybody mind if I scream here?"
was improvised by him. The spaces the characters move around is also important. Everything was shot on location, which supports the realism of the picture. Most of the film was shot in London, but outside of a few recognizable parts of Soho, it isn't about the city. The story could take place anywhere, especially because of its nocturnal nature with spaces that look like hell or purgatory. The office building was initially a regular workplace, with desks and computers, but the film's production designer Ellison Chitty found this empty building that was functioning like we see it in the film, and they thought this fit the theme of the film much better.
You garden space?
Lee is not known for a lot of camera movements, but in Naked there are some exceptions. The first and last shots of the film are opposites of each other. The violent first scene is shot handheld by cinematographer Dick Pope, who rushes towards Johnny and the woman. In the last shot though, they use the Steadicam where he's slowly moving backward with Johnny from the stairs to the end of the street. This scene was also very well choreographed. The house was a small space to shoot in, so the crew had to move when Johnny passed them and sat on the stairs. Their goal was to hide this bit of movement to keep the flow of the scene and the illusion of it being shot just by panning the camera. Some of the scenes on the street were shot in guerrilla style from far away without crowd control, which is especially challenging in the daytime when London is the busiest. This was due to budget constraints and because it was almost impossible to get a permit to shoot on the streets of London. However, the most important feature of the film's look is in its development process.
There's always an agreed time where I'm committed to sit down with the cinematographer. I said, well, what's emerging is it's a kind of solo nocturnal journey. It has a darkness about it.
Which then took me to 1984, which Roger Deakins shot in 1984, on which I worked, on which I was second unit. So I was able to see this process, bleach bypass, at first hand on that film. Bleach bypass is a process where you skip a certain stage of the processing and you end up with something that's quite grainy, quite contrasty, and very, very desaturated.
Naked has been recently remastered by the British Film Institution with the help of Mike Leigh and Dick Pope, where they managed to recover their vision and the deep contrast of the bleach bypass. Criterion's release in comparison had lighter shadows, and the colors are also a bit different.
I mean, look what you can now do with old movies. It's fantastic. And you know, people say, oh, well, it doesn't look like it did. So what? Actually, so what? The main thing is, if you can do it with integrity and make it look how you think it should look now, if somebody says it didn't look like that, then who's to say?
The film's focus is on its detailed characters. Through them, Lee explores the ugliest parts of human relationships. As Ray Carney writes in his book, The Films of Mike Leigh, Lee's characters are not their thoughts and feelings, but their social interactions, movements, gestures, tones of voice, and facial expressions. Johnny is a highly intelligent person, but he is bitter and disappointed with the world and people around him. Everywhere he goes, he's an outsider. He doesn't follow social norms, and he's an idealist, valuing consciousness above all.
Johnny is an idealist, but he's a frustrated idealist, a disappointed, embittered idealist, an idealist whose aspirations have turned in on themselves.
He's very well read, and he can't stop talking about his ideas to others.
Why do you feel the need to take the piss?
I'm not taking a piss.
With his erratic behavior, he hurts people around him, mostly with words, but due to his frustrations and deluded abuse, he can be violent towards women during sex. Lee shows this in the very first scene of the film. We get introduced to Johnny in the worst way possible, but as the film goes on, we can see a range of emotions from him. And while some of his actions are not justifiable, he becomes a character we are intrigued and sometimes charmed by. He can also be compassionate, as we can see with Maggie, Brian, or even Louise at the end of the film. But as he's a deeply layered character with a dark history, we can't expect a happy end from him. Louise is someone who moved to London to work, much to Johnny's disapproval. She doesn't enjoy it, but she accepts it and lives her life. She is much stronger and more composed than most other characters we see in the film, but she's also hurt by Johnny's behavior and him opening her eyes to the mundanity of her life, where even an impossible future with Johnny is something to long for. Sophie, who goes through a lot in this film, is lost in her life. Without a job, sitting at home drinking and smoking joints, she seems to have a horrible past which results in her need for love. She is a character who has had a lot of experiences with men and is struggling to get out of vicious and toxic cycles.
Trust that we as filmmakers weren't being gratuitous. It would be outrageous if we were being gratuitous, if this film was done with no sense of responsibility, because obviously a great deal of thought and discussion has gone into the film, and on the part of the women. One of the important things to remember is the women created these characters based on women they knew and instigated their own behavior.
Jaromir Sebastian is a psychopathic businessman who abuses his wealth and power to hurt and rape women. He's an evil representation of the social class who got rich during the Thatcher era and tramps through everything and everyone. With him, Lee criticized unacceptable male behaviors, but obviously Jeremy's actions caused controversy after the film's release.
I think this film was made from a love of people and from a love of life. It investigates a misogynist, nihilistic character, but that is not to say that Mike or myself are nihilistic or misogynist or pessimistic even.
As Ray Carney writes, Lee replaces judgment with wonder at the range of human diversity. His work is less about judging than understanding. Through them and a few others Johnny meets, Mike Leigh can show the decadent nature of this world. Thanks to Johnny's long rants, the film touches on a lot of interesting topics. He talks about evolution, the past, present and future of our species, the apocalypse, aging, love, boredom, technology and many others.
I mean, tossing all these satellites and shuttles out into the cosmos, what do they think they're going to find up there that they can't find down here?
Lee talked about how he shared the hate of the computer age with Johnny, which was getting more advanced constantly during the 90s. Since then, the director praised a lot of digital technology for filmmaking, such as easier editing and color grading that resembles film stocks, which also shows that what we can see in the film has to be considered in the context of 1992. Having said that, Naked's core ideas and philosophies are sometimes even more relevant today. The exploration of human connections and the mistakes and wrongdoings of these ordinary people can teach us a lot about ourselves and the people around us. As Lee said in an interview, life is abrasive for a lot of people, and there's not getting around it. I think a function of art, and the cinema not least, is to confront these things. I'm absolutely committed as a filmmaker to be entertaining and to amuse, but I am also concerned to confront, as I did in Life is Sweet and other films. This is why it resonates with so many people to this day. There are ugly things in our world, in our behaviors and thoughts that have to be explored, even if it's hard to look at.
Obviously, Johnny has a preoccupation with death.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, have you ever seen a dead body? And he said, no. I said, well, why don't you go and have a look at one, which we arranged. Actually, I think everybody would benefit from seeing a dead body. And I mean, it's part of life, actually, you know.
This requires actors who are willing to explore these dark themes and to show themselves as these people. Even the film's title hints at the characters being totally exposed, where we can see their inner workings and souls.
How difficult it would be to create this material with actors and actresses who in any way would suffer from being sentimental or wanted their characters to be liked in the Hollywood way.
Naked presents a small slice of Johnny's life and the apocalyptic landscape of the 1990s. As David Thewlis put it, this is only 3 days of his life, not even an exceptional 3 days.
Well, that was lovely.
The world Johnny occupies in the film is not London. It can be anywhere, and just as he's not connected to a place, he's not connected to time either. Y2K's apocalypse, the prophecy of Revelations, is not fulfilled at the end of the 90s.
I certainly had a feeling that in some way I wanted to deal with the desolate nature of the times we live in.
The end of the world is here all around us, just as it was back when the film was made. The bleakness of our world, filled with war, greed, corruption and purposelessness, reveals the ugliest parts of the human spirit every day. The force of the unending growth and technological advancement that pulls us away from our humanity and each other is stronger than ever. Johnny's questions and answers are the laments of the deepest parts of our minds, and the film takes us on a journey to a hellish dreamland of our psyche, Jung's shadow we need to face, not for our entertainment, but for our redemption.